He lunged at me right there in the foster agency parking lot. But what drained the color from his face wasn't the handcuffs. It was the signature he never knew existed. I thought I'd come to safely pick up a child. Turns out, I was picking up the last day of freedom for a man who'd lived off forged signatures for 10 years. And when the court clerk said, "Here's the original signed and sealed," he finally understood tonight. Every asset, every freedom, and even the guardian title he'd stolen would all be gone. My name is Mara Quinn, and I never thought a simple pickup at a foster agency would end with my stepfather in handcuffs. But that Tuesday afternoon at Harborgate Family Services changed everything. The Redwood Plains autumn air bit through my jacket as I stepped out of my Honda Civic. The parking lot stretched before me, half empty under gray Midwest skies. I'd taken the afternoon off from my job as a tech compliance specialist to handle this court-appointed duty temporary kinship placement for my young niece, while the state evaluated permanent options. I saw them before they saw me. Glenn Riker's Ford F-150 occupied 2 spaces near the entrance, typical of his need to dominate even asphalt. My mother Vera sat in the passenger seat, her face turned away from the building. Glenn stood by the tailgate, arms crossed, his contractor's bulk blocking the walkway. "You shouldn't be here," I said, keeping my voice level as I approached the entrance. Glenn's face twisted into that familiar sneer. "Last I checked, family has rights. You think you can just waltz in and take control of that money, I mean? That kid?" The slip told me everything. This wasn't about my niece's welfare. It was about the foster care stipend. "The court appointed me as temporary guardian. You saw the paperwork." "Paperwork," he spat the word. "You always did hide behind paperwork, didn't you? Just like when you refused to help with the business loans. Family helps family. Mara." I sidestepped him, but he moved to block me again. Through the glass doors, I could see Mrs. Henderson from Harborgate watching us, her hand already reaching for something, probably the security button. "The child stays in the secure area during pickups," I said, loud enough for potential witnesses. "She won't see any of this." That's when Glenn grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. "You're not hearing me. We're handling this as a family. You're going to walk away, and Vera and I will—" His fist connected with my shoulder before I could finish processing his words. Pain exploded down my arm as I stumbled backward, catching myself against a parked car. The parking lot tilted, righted itself. I heard Vera's sharp intake of breath from the truck, saw 2 Harborgate security guards rushing out. "Sir, step back immediately." The larger guard positioned himself between Glenn and me while his partner helped me stand. Glenn's face flushed deeper. "This is family business." "Not on our property. It isn't." The guard's tone brooked no argument. "Ma'am, are you injured?" I nodded, cradling my shoulder. Already I could feel the swelling beginning. I need to complete the pickup. The child. The child is safe in our activity room with a certified counselor, completely separated from this area," Mrs. The Henderson assured me, having joined us outside. "She hasn't seen or heard anything. We take these precautions seriously." As security dealt with Glenn, Mrs. Henderson guided me inside. At the reception desk, she paused, glancing around before pulling out a sealed envelope from a locked drawer. "This was left for you 6 weeks ago," she said quietly, pressing it into my good hand. "The person who left it said you'd need it when the time came. They also said," she leaned closer, "he doesn't know who really signed." I stared at the envelope, my mind racing despite the throbbing in my shoulder. No return address, just my name in careful block letters and confidential "do not open until needed" across the seal. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Through the window, I watched Glenn jabbing his finger at the security guards while Vera remained frozen in the truck. 10 years of his financial manipulation, his bullying, his control, and it had come to this. I tucked the envelope into my jacket's inner pocket. Whatever was inside would wait. Right now, I had a scared little girl to pick up and a police report to file. But something told me this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The emergency room at Redwood Plains General smelled of disinfectant and floor wax. I shifted on the examination table, wincing as Dr. Patel manipulated my shoulder. Mild subluxation, soft tissue trauma, she said, making notes on her tablet. You're lucky a few inches higher, and we'd be looking at facial injuries. The bruising pattern is textbook for adult-on-adult assault. Lucky. I thought of my niece, safe with a social worker in the hospital's family room, coloring pictures and blissfully unaware of the afternoon's violence. Yes, I supposed I was lucky. I'll need photographs for your medical record, Dr. Patel continued. They'll be useful for law enforcement as well. As the nurse documented my injuries, memories flooded back a decade's worth of Glenn's manipulations I'd tried to minimize as family friction. The credit card he'd insisted I co-sign for business expenses when I was 22 and fresh out of college. The utility accounts he'd put in my name for rental properties I'd never seen. The internet service contract for his home office that somehow required my signature as a temporary measure. Each request had come wrapped in guilt. Family helps family, Mara, always with my mother standing silent in the background, her eyes pleading for me to keep the peace. All done, the nurse said, helping me back into my shirt. The officer outside would like to speak with you when you're ready. Officer Chen, no. Wait, her badge read, Officer Martinez took my statement with practiced efficiency. Yes, I wanted to press charges. Yes, there were witnesses. No, this wasn't the first incident, though it was the first time he'd gotten physical. I'll need an emergency protective order too, I said. Not just for me, for my niece. Glenn's trying to interfere with a court-ordered placement. Martinez nodded. We can expedite that. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Yes. I thought of my apartment's security system, recently upgraded after Glenn had shown up drunk one night demanding I contribute to the family. And I'm calling my half-brother Luke as soon as we're done here. He left home at 17 because of Glenn. He'll want to know about this. After Martinez left, I sat in the quiet room and finally pulled out my phone. Luke answered on the second ring. Mara. Everything okay? Not really. I gave him the condensed version the Foster pickup. Glenn's assault, the hospital. I'm driving down from Chicago right now, he said immediately. That bastard's finally crossed a line he can't smooth-talk his way back from. Luke. No arguments. You testified at my custody hearing when I needed it. I'm returning the favor. Besides, his voice hardened. I've got my own stories about Glenn that might interest the police. Financial stuff he tried to pull before I went no contact. After ending the call, I stared at the sealed envelope Mrs. Henderson had given me. When the time came, she'd said, well, if this wasn't the time, what was? But something made me hesitate. There was an order to these things, a proper sequence. First, the protective orders, then, building the criminal case. The envelope felt like an ace up my sleeve, one I shouldn't play until I understood the game better. I thought about Glenn's slip in the parking lot. That money, the Foster stipend, wasn't huge, but to someone juggling failed business ventures and mounting debts, even a modest monthly check might seem worth fighting for. How many other revenue streams had he created using family members' names and signatures? The discharged nurse knocked and entered with my paperwork. The social worker says your niece is asking for you. She's been very patient, but... I'm coming. I eased off the table, my shoulder protesting. Whatever Glenn's schemes, whatever secrets that envelope held, one thing was certain: I was done being patient, done keeping the peace. Tomorrow, I'd start following the paper trail. Tonight, I had a little girl who needed to know she was safe, loved, and that the adults in her life were finally going to protect her from everything, including the monsters that shared her last name. Pioneer Federal Credit Union occupied a corner lot downtown, its red brick facade a remnant of Redwood Plains' more prosperous past. I pushed through the glass doors at exactly 9 a.m., my shoulder still aching despite the prescription ibuprofen. I need to speak with someone about potential fraud on my accounts, I told the teller, keeping my voice steady. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Marcus Williams, the branch's fraud investigator, Spread between us were 5 loan applications I'd never seen before. "These signatures," Williams said, pulling up a comparison on his monitor. "They're good forgeries, but not perfect. See here." He pointed to a loop in the Q of Quinn. "Your authentic signature has a distinctive break in the curve. These forgeries show a continuous line." My stomach churned as I reviewed the documents. Small consumer loans for appliances, electronics, home improvements, each just under the threshold that would trigger enhanced verification. The addresses matched properties I recognized as Glenn's rental units. "The most recent one is interesting," Williams continued, sliding another paper across the desk. "A refinancing application for a home equity line of credit. Denied, fortunately, because the property title didn't match the applicant name, but someone tried to use your credit score to secure better terms." "How long has this been going on?" "The oldest application we have is from 3 years ago, but here's what's particularly useful for your case." Williams pulled up a new screen. "All of these applications were submitted online. We log IP addresses for security purposes. Every single one originated from the same location." He wrote down the IP address and timestamp data on bank letterhead. "Our legal department will cooperate fully with any criminal investigation. Fraud affecting our members is something we take very seriously." I left Pioneer Federal with a folder of evidence and a splitting headache. Luke was waiting in the parking lot, having driven through the night from Chicago. "You look like hell," he said, pulling me into a careful hug. "Feel worse, but look at this." I showed him the loan documents. "Remember when Glenn asked you to co-sign for that equipment lease when you were 18? Luke's jaw tightened. "The one that tanked my credit before I even had credit?" "Yeah, I remember." "Same pattern. He's been doing this for years. Just got better at it." We drove to the courthouse next. The records room supervisor, a bird-like woman named Janet, seemed to know exactly what we were looking for before we finished explaining. "Riker Homeworks, LLC," she typed efficiently. "Oh yes, quite a paper trail here. Business license, multiple DBA filings, contractor bonds." She printed page after page. I scanned through them, my pattern recognition skills from tech compliance work kicking in. The timing was suspicious. New DBAs filed right before each loan application. Bonds secured using the same addresses as the fraudulent loans. "Wait," Luke pointed to one document. "Look at the witness signature on this contractor's license renewal." My blood ran cold. It was my name, but absolutely not my handwriting. "And here," Janet pulled up another screen. "Benefit applications. Looks like someone's been applying for various assistance programs. See this one application for kinship care support. Filed 2 months ago. Listed Glenn Riker as primary caregiver for," she squinted at the screen, "a minor child matching your niece's birth date." "But she wasn't even in foster care 2 months ago," I said. "Exactly. Someone was planning ahead, anticipating she'd end up in the system and positioning themselves to receive the benefits." Janet's expression was grim. "I see this sometimes. People treat foster kids like paychecks. Makes me sick." I thought of the envelope still sealed in my jacket. My fingers itched to open it, but instinct held me back. We were building something here, constructing a careful case. Whatever was in that envelope needed to land at precisely the right moment. "One more thing," Janet said, lowering her voice. "You didn't hear this from me, but Nadia Cortez from Harborgate was in here last week. She was looking at some of these same documents. Seemed particularly interested in the dates on those benefit applications." Luke and I exchanged glances. Nadia, the Harborgate employee who'd seemed so troubled when Glenn's name came up during the placement meeting. As we left the courthouse, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your mother wants to talk. Things aren't what they seem. N.C. Nadia Cortez." My heart rate spiked. "What do you think?" I showed Luke the message. "I think Glenn's house of cards is starting to wobble," he said. "Question is, who else wants to see it fall?" The coffee shop Nadia suggested sat on the edge of town, far enough from downtown that we wouldn't run into anyone from Harborgate or the courthouse. She was already there when I arrived, hunched over a laptop in the back corner booth. "Thank you for coming," she said. closing the computer as I slid in across from her. Her hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. I could lose my job for this.
Then why risk it?
Because some things matter more than a paycheck. She pulled out a folder, keeping it closed for now. I've worked in foster care for 12 years. I've seen all kinds of people try to game the system, but what your stepfather's doing? It's elaborate. She opened the folder, revealing internal Harborgate memos and assessment forms. 6 weeks ago, your mother came to our office, alone. She said she needed to report something but was scared. We're mandated reporters, so I had to document everything she told me. I scanned the papers, my chest tightening with each line. Vera had detailed Glenn's plans to intercept foster payments, his pressure on her to sign documents she didn't understand, his threats when she resisted. But then, Nadia continued, Glenn showed up the next day with her. She recanted everything, said she'd been confused, on new medication. He was all charm. Brought coffee for the whole office. Talked about how difficult it must be for us dealing with family drama. You didn't believe the recantation, would you? But without Vera's cooperation, my hands were tied. I did what I could, made sure you got emergency custody instead of them, documented everything, and... She hesitated. And I kept the original statement, the one Vera signed before she recanted. That's what's in that sealed envelope Mrs. Henderson gave you. Along with something else, Vera left a USB drive she said contained insurance. I don't know what's on it. My mind raced. Vera had tried to blow the whistle 6 weeks ago. What had Glenn done to silence her? There's more, Nadia said. The benefit applications your stepfather filed. He's not just anticipating future foster placements. He's been claiming benefits for children who don't exist. Phantom cases with paperwork that looks legitimate unless you dig deep. How deep? Deep enough that he needed someone inside the system to help hide discrepancies. He's been pressuring me to alter visit records, backdate assessments. I've been documenting everything, recording when I could. She tapped her laptop. It's all here, every request, every threat disguised as a friendly suggestion. We need to get this to the police, I said. Agreed. But there's something you should know first. Last week, Glenn came to my office. He knows I've been in touch with you. I don't know how. He made it very clear that if I didn't start cooperating, he'd make sure I was investigated for the very fraud he's committing. He's got fake emails ready to go, claiming I solicited bribes from foster families. He's threatening you to cover his tracks. Classic Glenn Riker. I've done my research since Vera's visit. Did you know he's pulled this in 2 other states? Different names on the businesses, but the same pattern. He finds vulnerable family members, uses their credit and identities, then disappears when things get hot. I thought of my mother, trapped in that truck while Glenn assaulted me. Why does Vera stay? Nadia's expression softened. Fear, shame after her first visit here. I gave her pamphlets about financial abuse. It's more common than people think, one partner systematically destroying the other's financial independence until leaving seems impossible. She slid the folder across to me. Everything's copied here. The originals are in my safety deposit box. I've also been in touch with families from the phantom cases. 3 of them are willing to testify that they never received any services despite Glenn's benefit claims. This is enough to bury him, Luke said. He'd been so quiet I'd almost forgotten he was there, standing watch by the window. Maybe, but he's slippery. Nadia stood to leave, then paused. Your mother, when she recanted, she slipped me a note. It just said, "Thank you for trying." I think she wanted me to know the truth was still the truth, even if she couldn't say it out loud. After Nadia left, Luke and I sat in silence, the weight of the evidence between us. We need a lawyer, I finally said. This is beyond assault charges now. This is systematic fraud, identity theft, benefit fraud. Conspiracy, Luke added. Extortion if he threatened Nadia. Mom's probably a victim too, not an accomplice. I pulled out my phone to call my attorney, then froze. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging or your mom pays. Check your email. The attached photo showed my mother's car, driver's side window smashed. He's escalating, Luke said grimly. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and Detective Martinez. Whatever game Glenn thought he was playing, he just showed his hand, and he had no idea what cards I was still holding. The threatening messages escalated over the next 48 hours. Photos of Luke's car with slashed tires, anonymous calls at 3 a.m. breathing heavily into the phone, an email with my niece's school schedule and the message, "Family takes care of family," or "Family gets hurt." That last one made the decision for me. I sat in Detective Sergeant Delaney's office at the Redwood Plains Police Department, spreading out every piece of evidence across her desk. "This goes beyond simple assault," Delaney said, studying the forensic accounting summary my lawyer had prepared. "We're looking at organized fraud spanning multiple jurisdictions. But these threats, they're fresh, current. We can use them."
How?
"We set a trap, document everything, get him on record making these threats." She pulled up a case file on her computer. "Your stepfather thinks he's smart, using burner phones and anonymous emails, but every digital action leaves traces." She assigned a tech specialist to my case officer Park, who looked barely old enough to be out of college but spoke about IP tracking and metadata like poetry. The threatening emails came through a VPN, but he made mistakes, Park explained. "See this timestamp? And this one, they correspond exactly to login attempts on your mother's bank account. Same device fingerprint. He's using the same laptop for legal and illegal activities." "Can we prove it's him?" "Working on it, but I need you to engage with the next threat. Reply. Draw him out. Make him think you're scared enough to negotiate." So when the next email came, "Last chance. Drop the charges or lose everything," I replied with shaking hands, "What do you want?" The response came within minutes. "Meet me at the old warehouse on Route 47. Come alone. Bring all the documents you've collected. We settle this like family." Delaney smiled grimly. "Perfect. We'll be there first." The next evening, I drove to the abandoned warehouse with a wire taped to my ribs and a USB drive full of fabricated documents in my pocket. The real evidence was safely duplicated in 3 locations, including the FBI's white-collar crime unit that had taken interest in the interstate fraud elements. Glenn's truck was already there, parked behind the building. He stepped out as I approached, his bulk silhouetted against the dying light. "Smart girl, coming alone," he said. "I'm here. What now?" "Now you hand over everything, every bank record, every statement Nadia gave you, every document you pulled from the courthouse." He moved closer, and I could smell whiskey on his breath. "And that envelope from Harborgate. Yeah, I know about that too."
How?
"Your mother tells me everything, eventually." His smile made my skin crawl. "She wanted to play hero, thought she could protect you, but I've got 10 years of her signatures on documents she never read. One word from me and she's as guilty as I am in the eyes of the law." "You're lying." "Am I who's been signing those tax returns, whose name is on the business accounts?" "Sure." I guided her hand, "but good luck proving that in court." This was it, the admission Delaney wanted. I pressed on. "So you've been forging signatures using Mom's name without her knowledge." "Forging is such an ugly word. I prefer facilitating family financial unity. And it's not just Vera, you, Luke, even cousin Sarah in Minnesota. Family resources should be shared. Mara, the foster care benefits, those aren't family resources. Those are for children who need help." His face darkened. "Don't lecture me about need. I've got bills. Debts you can't imagine. That construction business your mother's father left her, I kept it afloat for years. I deserve compensation. By stealing from children. By taking what's owed." He stepped closer, fists clenched. "Now give me those documents before this gets uglier than last time." "You mean before you assault me again like you did at Harborgate?" That was a warning tap. This time you'll be under arrest." Delaney's voice cut through the darkness as spotlights flooded the area. "Glenn Riker, you're under arrest for assault, fraud, identity theft, and extortion." Glenn spun around, saw the officers closing in, and made a last desperate play. "She's lying. She attacked me first. I've got witnesses." "Save it for your lawyer," Delaney said as officers cuffed him. Though you might want to know, Vera Riker gave a full statement this afternoon. Turns out she's been documenting your crimes for the past year, waiting for the right moment to get free. As they led Glenn away, still shouting about betrayal and family loyalty, I pulled out the sealed envelope. Inside, along with Vera's original statement, was a handwritten note. I'm sorry it took me so long to be the mother you deserved. The USB has everything, every forged document, every threat, every stolen penny. Use it all. Love, Mom. The USB drive contained everything my mother had promised and more. As I sat with Detective Park in the police station's digital forensics lab, each file revealed another layer of Glenn's deception. Your mother was meticulous, Park said, scrolling through folders organized by date and type. Bank statements, emails, recordings. She even photographed documents before and after forgery. One file made my breath catch a video timestamp from 6 weeks ago. I clicked play and saw my mother sitting in her car, speaking directly to the camera. My name is Vera Riker, she said, her voice steady despite visible bruises on her wrist. I'm recording this on May 3rd, after my first visit to Harborgate Family Services. What I told them was true. My husband, Glenn Riker, has been forging signatures, stealing identities, and defrauding government benefit programs. I'm going to recant tomorrow because he's threatened to destroy Mara and Luke if I don't, but this is the truth. She held up document after document, explaining each forgery, each scheme. The construction company Glenn claimed to be saving, she'd discovered he'd been siphoning funds for years, billing phantom renovations to real properties. I've been afraid, she continued on the recording. Not of physical violence, Glenn's too smart for that, usually, but of what he could do with all the documents I've signed over the years. He made me believe I was complicit, but I've learned that victims of financial abuse aren't criminals. I'm done being afraid. The recording ended with her showing a small key. Safety deposit box, 447 at Pioneer Federal. Everything's there. If something happens to me, or if I'm too scared to speak up again, someone please help my children. This is powerful, Park said. But there's more. He opened another folder, audio recordings. Vera had been recording Glenn for months, capturing his admissions, his threats, his elaborate plans to expand the benefit fraud across state lines. Listen to this one, Park said, clicking on a file dated a week before the Harborgate incident. Glenn's voice filled the room. Once we get custody of the brat, we'll have access to not just foster payments, but survivor benefits from her dead father. I've already got the paperwork started. Mara won't know what hit her when we file for emergency custody based on her instability. A few staged incidents, some concerned family member reports. My stomach churned. He'd been planning to frame me as unfit, to steal my niece and her benefits. Your mother knew, Park said quietly. That's why she went to Harborgate when she did. She was trying to stop him before the custody grab. My phone buzzed a text from Luke. Mom's here at your apartment. She's ready to talk. An hour later, I sat across from my mother in my living room. Without Glenn's looming presence, she looked smaller but somehow stronger. The scared woman in the truck was gone, replaced by someone who'd found her steal. I signed the immunity agreement this morning, she said. Full cooperation in exchange for acknowledgement that I was a victim of coercive control. My lawyer says it's ironclad. Mom, the recording. I made 12 of them, she interrupted. Started the day I found out he'd opened a credit card in Luke's name again. He'd promised that was behind us. But predators don't change. They just get better at hiding. She pulled out a notebook, filled with her handwriting. Every forged document, every fake company, every stolen benefit, I tracked it all. Do you know he was billing Medicare for home health services that never existed, using the names of elderly people who died? The scope kept expanding. What had started as assault charges had revealed a criminal enterprise. Why didn't you leave? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. Where would I go? He'd destroyed my credit, isolated me from family, convinced me I was complicit in his crimes. But when he started talking about your niece, her voice hardened. Children were my line. I couldn't let him destroy another generation. The sealed envelope, I said. You gave it to Harborgate 6 weeks ago. You were already planning this. She nodded. I knew he'd escalate when he couldn't get custody. I wanted evidence in place, somewhere he couldn't reach. Nadia Cortez helped more than you know. She connected me with resources for financial abuse victims, helped me understand my options. A knock interrupted us. Luke entered with our lawyer, Diana Morrison, who carried a thick folder. The prosecutor's office is moving forward with RICO charges, Diana announced. Racketeering, given the interstate nature and the involvement of multiple victims across state lines. Glenn's looking at federal prison. But that's not why I'm here, she continued, her expression shifting. Vera, we found something in the financial records. Your father's construction company, Glenn, never had legal ownership. The forged transfer documents. We can prove they're fake. The company's been yours all along. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. But he said, the debts. Fabricated. The legitimate business has been profitable. Glenn's been hiding the real books, siphoning money while showing you false losses. We're talking about embezzlement over $700,000 over 10 years. The room went silent as we absorbed this final revelation. Glenn hadn't just stolen identities and benefits. He'd stolen an entire business, a legacy, a decade of my mother's life. There's more, Diana said. The federal prosecutor wants to meet tomorrow. With Glenn's interstate activities and the evidence you've collected, they're building a case that could help dozens of victims across multiple states. Vera, you're not just saving your family, you're stopping a serial predator. The courtroom of Judge Eleanor Briggs carried the weight of old justice, dark wood panels, high ceilings, and an atmosphere that demanded truth. I sat in the gallery's front row with Luke, watching Glenn's attorney shuffle papers with increasing desperation. Your Honor, Glenn's lawyer began, my client files a counter-motion for defamation and malicious prosecution. These allegations are nothing but a vindictive family dispute blown out of proportion. Counselor, Judge Briggs interrupted, her voice sharp as winter wind. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence. Would you like to explain how a family dispute involves fraudulent federal benefit applications across 3 states? The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Harrington, stood. Your Honor, we'd like to present our evidence in sequence, beginning with the financial forensics. What followed was a methodical destruction of Glenn's decade-long criminal enterprise. Harrington introduced each piece like a symphony conductor, building to an inevitable crescendo. Exhibit A through F bank records, showing systematic forgery of family members' signatures. The overhead display showed Glenn's attempted recreations next to authentic signatures, the differences glaring under magnification. Exhibit G IP logs from Pioneer Federal Credit Union, tracing fraudulent loan applications to the defendant's home address and personal devices. Glenn shifted in his seat, whispering furiously to his attorney. Exhibit H through M recorded conversations between the defendant and Vera Riker, documenting coercive control and explicit admissions of fraud. Glenn's voice filled the courtroom. Signatures are just lines on paper. Vera, stop being dramatic. Exhibits N through R false benefit applications for phantom foster children, including forged medical assessments and placement documents. The gallery murmured. Several reporters typed frantically. And finally, Harrington paused for effect. Exhibit S a pattern of similar fraud in Nevada and Illinois, resulting in 4 elderly victims losing their life savings through identity theft. Objection. Glenn's attorney shot up. Those cases aren't part of the current charges. They establish pattern and practice, Judge Briggs ruled. Overruled. Then came the witnesses. Nadia Cortez testified about Glenn's attempts to manipulate foster care records. Officer Park detailed the digital evidence trail. 3 victims from the phantom foster care scheme described discovering benefits claimed in their names for children they'd never met. But the courtroom held its breath when Vera took the stand. Mrs. Riker, Harrington began gently, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? My mother sat straight, her voice clear. I was married to Glenn Riker for 11 years. For 10 of those years, He systematically destroyed my financial independence while convincing me I was complicit in his crimes.
Can you elaborate?
She looked directly at Glenn for the first time. He would put papers in front of me during dinner, say they were for utilities or insurance. I'd sign later. I'd discover they were loan applications, benefit forms, business transfers. When I questioned him, he'd show me how my signature was on everything, said if he went down, I'd go with him, that my children would lose their mother. When did this change? When he started talking about my granddaughter, about using her for money, I realized he'd never stop. The only way to protect my family was to document everything and wait for the right moment. Glenn's attorney tried to crack her on cross-examination. Isn't it true you willingly signed these documents that you benefited from the money? I signed documents I was told were routine household papers. As for benefiting, Vera's voice turned to steel. He stole my father's company, destroyed my credit, and isolated me from everyone who might have helped. Where exactly was my benefit? The moment of highest drama came when the court clerk stood. Your Honor, I've been asked to present a sealed affidavit, notarized and filed with Harborgate Family Services 6 weeks ago. Judge Briggs reviewed the document, her eyebrows rising. This is a sworn statement from Vera Riker, dated May 3rd, detailing the defendant's criminal activities, signed and witnessed before any of the current charges were filed. Glenn exploded. She's lying. She couldn't have. Mr. Riker, control yourself or I'll have you removed, Judge Briggs warned. But Glenn wasn't finished. He pointed at me, spittle flying. This is all Mara's doing. She poisoned everyone against me. That assault charge is fake. Actually, Harrington interjected smoothly, we have security footage from Harborgate showing the assault in detail. Would you like us to play it for the court? Glenn's lawyer grabbed his client's arm, whispered urgently, but Glenn shook him off, still ranting about ungrateful families and conspiracies. Enough, Judge Briggs commanded. I've heard sufficient evidence to rule on the immediate matters. The protective orders are granted permanently. The defendant's assets are frozen pending federal investigation. As for the criminal charges, she looked directly at Glenn. Mr. Riker, you stand accused of assault, 47 counts of fraud, 18 counts of identity theft, and racketeering. The evidence presented today is overwhelming. You are remanded to federal custody without bail due to flight risk and witness intimidation. No, Glenn lurched forward, but the bailiffs were ready. As they cuffed him, Glenn's desperate eyes found Vera. You destroyed us, our life. No, my mother said quietly, but everyone heard her. You destroyed yourself. I just kept the receipts. The gavel fell. The courtroom erupted, and I watched the man who'd terrorized my family for a decade disappear through a side door in shackles, heading for a federal cell where signatures forged or real would buy him nothing but time. The final blow came not from the judge or the prosecutor, but from a document I'd signed myself 3 days after the parking lot assault. Your Honor, Diana Morrison announced, standing with quiet confidence, we'd like to present one last piece of evidence, a conditional financial power of attorney, executed by my client Mara Quinn, with specific activation clauses. Glenn's attorney frowned. We weren't notified of this. Because it only became active 6 minutes ago, Diana smiled. When Mr. Riker was formally convicted of fraud, per the terms my client established with her half-brother Luke Harrow as designated agent, all civil claims against Mr. Riker are now automatically filed. Judge Briggs leaned forward, intrigued. Explain. My client anticipated that Mr. Riker might try to hide assets or transfer them before civil proceedings could begin. This document, properly notarized and filed, grants Mr. Harrow immediate authority to freeze any transfers and file liens against all of Mr. Riker's properties, including the shell companies. Luke stood up in the gallery, holding a folder. Your Honor, I've just filed 17 liens totaling $1.3 million in damages across all known Riker assets. The paperwork was submitted electronically the moment the guilty verdict was read. Glenn's face went from red to white. His attorney scrambled through papers. They can and they did. Judge Briggs noted with what might have been satisfaction. Very forward-thinking, Counselor Morrison. But Diana wasn't finished. Additionally, Your Honor, Harborgate Family Services has exercised their co-signature rights under federal benefit fraud statutes. When a placement agency discovers systematic fraud, they can partner with legitimate guardians to recover stolen funds. Mrs. Henderson from Harborgate stood up. We've co-signed every recovery document. Every penny stolen from children in our care will be pursued. No. Glenn tried to stand, but the shackles held him. Those properties are mine. The business is mine. Actually, Vera said, standing for the first time, the construction company was never yours, and thanks to my daughter's foresight and my son's quick action, it never will be. The authentic ownership documents were filed with the state this morning, along with a decade of proof showing your embezzlement. Judge Briggs raised her gavel one final time. Mr. Riker, you built an empire on forged signatures and stolen identities. It seems poetic justice that legitimate signatures properly filed and perfectly timed should be your downfall. This court orders full asset forfeiture to satisfy both criminal fines and civil damages. Further, upon completion of your federal sentence, you are permanently barred from serving as a fiduciary guardian or representative for any individual or organization. The gavel fell with finality. As the bailiffs led Glenn away, he turned one last time, but instead of rage, his face showed something else, the dawning realization that every scheme, every forgery, every threat had led to this moment. He'd spent a decade stealing signatures, never realizing that the right signature at the right time could destroy everything he'd built on lies. Outside the courthouse, our small group gathered. My niece was safe with a social worker, still blissfully unaware of the battle fought in her name. She'd grow up free from Glenn's influence, supported by the very benefits he'd tried to steal. How did you know to set up that power of attorney? I asked Luke. He shrugged. You taught me always have a backup plan. Glenn taught me something too. Though he didn't mean to. He showed me that papers can be weapons. I just made sure we had better ammunition. Vera took my hand. I'm sorry it took me so long. Don't, I interrupted. You saved us all. Those recordings. That evidence you were fighting back the only way you could. As we walked down the courthouse steps, Diana's phone buzzed. She smiled at the message. The federal prosecutor just confirmed, based on the evidence collected here, they've identified 43 additional victims across 5 states. Glenn's going away for a very long time. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated offices of Quinn Construction, my mother's rightful inheritance restored. The walls displayed the company's honest history, no longer hidden beneath Glenn's lies. Vera worked at her father's old desk, rebuilding what had been stolen. Luke managed the finances with an iron grip, ensuring every signature was verified, every document legitimate. My niece played in the corner, safe and loved, unaware that her college fund grew daily from the recovered assets, money that would support her dreams instead of feeding a predator's greed. The sealed envelope from Harborgate sat framed on my wall, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon against evil isn't a gun or a fist, it's a signature on the right document at the right moment, backed by the courage to use it. Glenn had been right about one thing: family takes care of family. He just never understood that real care means protecting each other from predators, even when the predator shares your name and sits at your dinner table, pushing papers across for you to sign. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below, so we can connect and discuss your thoughts on this wild journey. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. And if you really want to help more people discover this story, please hit that hype button. It makes a huge difference in getting these important stories heard by those who need them. Until next time, stay safe and always read before you sign.